This is a quick overview of the weighting process for strategy models. First, I want to outline 4 guidelines that we typically use. First, the weighting or emphasis doesn't necessarily mean how many people are involved with that objective or how much money or even how much managerial focus and time at board meetings is spent on it. It's kind of a combination of all those things. One of my colleagues from California talked about the amount of energy each objective has. Secondly, it's important to note that we're weighting it for the entire business unit, not just your individual accountabilities or department or region. Take off your functional hat and put on the overall CEO manager hat for the scope of the area being scorecarded. Thirdly, understand that we're weighting it for a set period of time. Typically, that's 12 months. Now, you might revisit the weighting once a quarter, but we want you to take sort of a 12-month view of what our focus and priorities need to be. And then finally, understand that it's not a democracy. Ultimately, it's the leader of your part of the organization who's accountable for setting the strategic priorities. And we're fortunate enough to be invited into this conversation where our opinions can be heard and put into context. But at the end of the day, that person has to make the calls. And frankly, they have the exposure to external pressures, meetings, board members, stakeholders, etc., and the experience to do so. So what does this look like? Typically what we do is we get a strategy map and we put it onto an Excel spreadsheet and we put each objective on its own separate line. Then what we can do is go around the room and each participant puts in their opinion of what the weighting should be for each of the 4 perspectives. So we do the 4 perspectives first and put those up on the board, have a debate, and agree on what the final weighting is, and then actually erase all the other scores so that they don't confuse us and we don't harbor that previous thinking. Once we've done that, we then need to take the next step, and again, this is an example from a small private school. We then are going to remind the participants of the overall 4 guidelines and, who has the final say on what that weighting looks like. Then eventually, each participant and the entire team will take that agreed to weighting for the perspective and allocate those across each of the objectives that are within that particular perspective. So in this case, this illustrative case, we had a 50% weighting on the internal perspective and 3 objectives. They came up with the weightings of 5, 35, and 10%. So 35% of our overall strategy is about instilling knowledge, skills, and adaptability within the student body, as an example. Now, once we're done, we'll have an overall weighting across the entire scorecard. That's the goal. And it's important to note that that's a 12-month view. If you want, you could also do one, say, 5 years out in the future. What that allows the team to do is to understand there are near-term things we need to do, battles to be fought, money to be allocated, but it's an aid of a longer-term activity, a longer-term weighting. Or in some cases, we use the board of directors to establish that longer-term weighting, because effectively that's what the board is supposed to be holding us accountable to, that longer-term view. To learn more about this and other concepts, please join us at pm2consulting.com.